The rain pounded the streets of Syracuse, New York, like it was trying to drown the city's secrets. Ezra Cole, barely 17, stood shivering under a flickering street lamp, his backpack soaked, his heart heavier than the storm. His parents' words still burned in his ears. "You're no son of ours if you choose that life." Cast out for being gay, Ezra had nowhere to go. His sneakers squelched against the pavement as he wandered, the weight of rejection pressing harder with every step. He was a boy with dreams. Music, art, a life where he could be himself. But tonight, those dreams felt like ash. Then headlights cut through the rain. A beat-up sedan pulled over, and a woman leaned out, her auburn curls damp but her voice steady. "Kid, you're gonna catch pneumonia out here. Get in." Her name was Mara Ellison, 35, a social worker with a sharp wit and a heart too big for her own good. She didn't know Ezra, but she knew the look in his eyes, fear, defiance, and a flicker of hope that hadn't quite died. She'd seen it in too many kids at the shelter where she worked. Without a second thought, she drove him to her small apartment on the edge of town, offering him a couch, a dry blanket, and a mug of cocoa that burned his palms but warmed his soul. "Why are you doing this?" Ezra asked, his voice barely above a whisper, suspicion etched into his gaunt face. Mara shrugged, stirring her own cocoa. "Because someone's gotta, and I've got a couch." That night, Ezra didn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of Mara's cluttered living room, wondering if this was a trap or a miracle. He'd grown up in a world that taught him love was conditional, that his truth was a sin. But Mara didn't ask questions. She didn't judge. She just left a plate of toast on the coffee table and went to bed, her footsteps soft but certain. Over the next few weeks, Mara's apartment became a sanctuary. Ezra, wiry and guarded, started opening up. He told her about his love for painting, how colors felt like freedom when words failed him. Mara listened, her hazel eyes steady, and shared stories of her own. Growing up biracial in a small town, fighting to be seen for who she was. She wasn't perfect. Her life was a mess of late bills and long hours, but she had a fire in her that Ezra envied. One evening, as they sat at her tiny kitchen table, Ezra hesitated before speaking. "What if I'm broken? What if they're right about me?" Mara set down her fork, her expression fierce. "Ezra, the only thing broken is a world that tells you love is wrong. You're not a mistake. You're a masterpiece." Her words hit like a lifeline, pulling him from the dark. For the first time, Ezra felt seen not as a problem but as a person. Mara wasn't just giving him a place to stay. She was giving him a reason to keep going. But life wasn't a fairy tale. Mara's apartment was a temporary fix, and Ezra knew it. The shelter was full, foster homes were scarce, and Mara's landlord was already grumbling about an extra tenant. Ezra overheard her arguing on the phone one night, pleading for more time, her voice cracking with frustration. Guilt gnawed at him. He didn't want to be a burden. One morning, Ezra found a flyer for an art contest at a local community center. The prize a scholarship to a summer art program in New York City. His heart raced. This could be his ticket out, not just from Mara's couch, but from the weight of his past. He spent nights sketching, pouring his pain and hope into every stroke. Mara noticed the spark in his eyes and bought him a set of cheap watercolors, pretending she'd found them in a closet. "You're gonna win this, kid," she said, ruffling his hair. "And if you don't, you'll still be the best artist I know." Ezra didn't win. He came in second, close enough to taste it but not enough to change his life. The disappointment crushed him, but Mara was there, unflinching. "Second place isn't failure," she told him. "It's proof you're in the game." As winter crept in, Ezra faced a choice. A distant aunt in California, the only family member who hadn't shunned him, offered to take him in. It meant leaving Syracuse, leaving Mara, but it also meant a chance at stability. Ezra was torn. Mara had become his anchor, but he couldn't stay astray forever. The night before he left, they sat on her couch, the silence heavy. "You saved me," Ezra said, his voice thick. "I don't know how to thank you." Mara smiled, her eyes glistening. "Just keep being you, Ezra. That's enough." He hugged her. The first real hug he'd given anyone in years, and promised to stay in touch. As his bus pulled away the next morning, Ezra watched Syracuse fade, Mara's figure growing smaller in the distance. He clutched a sketch he'd made for her, a vibrant painting of two figures under a canopy of autumn leaves, their hands clasped, a quiet promise of hope. Years passed, and Ezra's life in California wasn't easy, but it was his. His aunt, Lena, was kind but distant, her life full of her own struggles. Ezra threw himself into art, channeling his pain into canvases that spoke louder than he ever could. He got a part-time job at a coffee shop, saved every penny, and enrolled in community college, majoring in fine arts. But Syracuse and Mara never left his heart. He wrote to her at first long, rambling letters about his classes, his sketches, the way the Pacific Ocean looked at sunset. Mara's replies were short but warm, always ending with, "Keep shining, kid." Then life got in the way. Ezra's studies consumed him, and Mara's letters slowed, then stopped. He told himself she was busy, that she was fine, but a part of him worried he'd been forgotten. By 23, Ezra had changed. Taller, broader, with a quiet confidence, he'd grown into himself. His art had evolved too raw and vivid, earning him a small following at local galleries. But success felt hollow without someone to share it with. He hadn't been back to Syracuse since he left, hadn't seen Mara in 6 years. The guilt of losing touch gnawed at him, but so did fear. What if she didn't remember him? What if she'd moved on? Then, a letter arrived not from Mara, but from the Syracuse Community Center. They were hosting a reunion for past art contest participants, and Ezra's name was on the list. The flyer mentioned a special guest, Mara Ellison, now a program director at the center. Ezra's heart skipped. This was his chance to see her, to thank her, to show her who he'd become. He booked a flight, his stomach in knots. Syracuse hadn't changed much. Same gray winters, same gritty charm. The community center was a low brick building, buzzing with familiar faces and new ones. Ezra lingered at the edge of the crowd, his portfolio tucked under his arm, nerves jangling. Then he saw her. Mara, now 41, stood at the front, her curls streaked with gray, her smile as fierce as ever. She was talking to a group of teens, her hands animated, her laugh carrying across the room. Ezra's throat tightened. She was still Mara, his Mara. He waited until the crowd thinned, then approached. "Mara!" His voice cracked, betraying the years. She turned, her eyes narrowing, then widening. "Ezra? Oh my God, Ezra!" She pulled him into a hug, and for a moment, he was 17 again, lost but found. They talked for hours, catching up over lukewarm coffee. Mara told him about her new role, how she'd fought to expand the center's programs for at-risk youth. Ezra shared his journey, his art, his struggles, the way her kindness had kept him going. He showed her his portfolio, paintings that screamed with color and emotion. Mara's eyes shone with pride. "You did it," she said softly. "You became everything I knew you could be." But something was off. Mara's smile faltered at times, her hands trembling as she held her cup. Ezra pressed, and she admitted she was tired, overworked, stretched thin. The center was struggling financially, and she was pouring everything into keeping it afloat. Ezra's heart sank. Mara had given him so much, and now she was the one drowning. That night, back at his hotel, Ezra couldn't sleep. He thought of the boy he'd been, the one Mara had saved. He thought of her apartment, her cocoa, her unwavering belief in him. He couldn't let her fight alone. The next day, he returned to the center with a plan. He'd been saving for a new studio, but Mara's cause was bigger. He met with the center's board, pitching an idea, an art auction featuring his work and that of other local artists, with all proceeds going to the center. The board was skeptical. Ezra was no big name, but his passion won them over. Mara protested when she heard, "You don't have to do this, Ezra. You've got your own life." "You gave me that life," he said firmly. "Let me give something back." The auction took shape over weeks, Ezra working tirelessly alongside Mara. They laughed, argued, and rediscovered the bond they'd built years ago. But Ezra sensed something deeper. Mara was hiding something, a weight she wouldn't share. He didn't push, but he watched her closely, determined to be there when she needed him. The auction was set for a crisp November evening. The community center transformed with string lights and vibrant artwork lining the walls. Ezra's pieces were the centerpiece, bold, emotional canvases that drew gasps from the crowd. He'd poured his heart into them, each one a tribute to the people who'd shaped him, especially Mara. As guests mingled, Ezra spotted familiar faces, old teachers, contest judges, even a few kids from the shelter days. He was no longer the scared teen they'd known. He stood tall, his voice steady as he welcomed everyone. But his eyes kept finding Mara, who moved through the crowd with grace, though her smile seemed strained. The bidding began, and Ezra's nerves frayed. What if no one bid? What if he'd overestimated his talent? But the first painting, a swirling depiction of a boy under a stormy sky, sold for $2,000. The room erupted in applause. By the end, they'd raised $15,000, enough to keep the center running for another year. Mara took the stage, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just about art," she said. "It's about giving kids a chance to be seen, to be loved. Ezra Cole made this possible, and I'm so damn proud of him." The crowd cheered, but Ezra barely heard. He was watching Mara, who looked paler than usual, her hands gripping the podium. After her speech, she slipped outside, and Ezra followed. He found her on the steps, staring at the stars. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. She sighed, her breath visible in the cold. "Just tired, Ezra. It's been a long road." He didn't buy it. "Mara talked to me. You've always been straight with me." She hesitated, then spoke, her voice low. "I got a diagnosis a few months back. Cancer. I'm fighting it, but it's a lot." The words hit like a punch. Ezra's world tilted. The woman who'd been his rock now fragile in a way he couldn't fathom. He took her hand, his voice steady despite the ache. "You're not fighting alone. Not now, not ever." Mara laughed softly, tears in her eyes. "You're still that stubborn kid, aren't you?" They sat in silence, the weight of her words settling between them. Ezra vowed to himself that he'd be there, just as she'd been for him. The auction had saved the center, but this was personal. Mara needed him, and he wouldn't let her down. Over the next few months, Ezra split his time between California and Syracuse. He took on freelance art projects to cover flights, spending weekends with Mara, driving her to appointments, cooking terrible dinners that made her laugh. Their bond deepened, no longer just rescuer and rescued but equals, two souls who'd found each other in the dark. One evening, as they sat in her apartment, still cluttered, still home, Ezra showed her a new painting. It was the two of them, hands clasped under autumn leaves, just like the sketch he'd given her years ago. "This is us," he said. "No matter what happens, this is us." Mara's eyes glistened. "You're my family, Ezra. You always have been." Mara's battle with cancer was grueling, but she fought with the same fire that had saved Ezra years ago. Chemotherapy drained her, but she still showed up at the center, still mentored kids, still made time to critique Ezra's latest sketches. He marveled at her strength, even as he saw the toll it took. Ezra's life was changing too. His art was gaining traction, with galleries in San Francisco and New York showing interest. But success meant nothing if Mara wasn't there to see it. He started a new project, a series of paintings called Sanctuary, each one inspired by the people and places that had given him hope. The centerpiece was Mara, her face radiant against a backdrop of autumn leaves. He didn't tell her about it. He wanted it to be a surprise, a way to honor her when she needed it most. The series debuted at a small gallery in Syracuse, and Ezra convinced Mara to attend, telling her it was just a little show. The gallery was packed, the air humming with excitement. When Mara saw the paintings, she froze, her hand covering her mouth. Each canvas told a story of loss, love, resilience. The final piece, Mara's Light, showed her as Ezra saw her, fierce, kind, unbreakable. The crowd loved it, but Ezra only cared about Mara's reaction. She pulled him aside, tears streaming. "You make me sound like a hero," she whispered. "You are," he said simply. The show raised enough to fund a new youth program at the center, named after Mara. She protested, of course, but Ezra and the board insisted. "You've saved so many of us," he told her. "Let us celebrate you." As Mara's treatment continued, Ezra faced his own crossroads. A gallery in New York offered him a residency, a chance to break into the art world for real. It meant leaving Syracuse again, but this time he wasn't running. He talked it over with Mara, who was in remission, her strength slowly returning. "Go," she said, her voice firm. "You've got a gift, Ezra. Share it with the world." He hesitated. "What about you?" She smiled, weaker but still Mara. "I'll be here, cheering you on. Always." Ezra took the residency, but he made a promise. He'd come back for the center's annual gala, a celebration of its work and Mara's legacy. He spent months in New York, his art evolving, his name growing. But Syracuse and Mara were never far from his mind. The gala was held on a warm June evening, the community center glowing with lights and laughter. Ezra, now 25, stepped off the plane in Syracuse, his heart racing. He hadn't seen Mara in person in months, though they talked weekly. She was in full remission now, her strength returning, but Ezra still worried. The center was packed with kids, families, and supporters. Ezra's paintings lined the walls, a testament to the journey he and Mara had shared. He found her in the crowd, her curls vibrant, her smile brighter than he'd seen in years. "Ezra," she called, pulling him into a hug. "Look at this place. You did this." "We did this," he corrected, his voice thick. The night was a blur of speeches, laughter, and music. Ezra took the stage, his hands trembling as he held the mic. 7 years ago, I was a kid with nowhere to go," he began. "I was thrown out for being who I am. But one person saw me, believed in me, and gave me a home. Mara Ellison saved my life." The room fell silent, all eyes on Mara, who looked stunned. Ezra continued, his voice breaking. "She taught me that love isn't just a word. It's action, it's sacrifice, it's showing up. This center, this community, is her heart made real. And I'm here to make sure it lives on." He revealed his final gift, a foundation in Mara's name, funded by his art sales, to support LGBTQ youth across the country. The crowd erupted, tears streaming down Mara's face as she joined him on stage. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice choked. "I wanted to," Ezra said. "You gave me a future. This is me giving it back." They hugged, the crowd cheering, the room alive with hope. Ezra looked out at the faces. Kids like he'd been. Families who'd found acceptance. A community built on love. Mara had started it all. And now, together, they'd carry it forward. As the night ended, Ezra and Mara stood outside, the stars bright above. "You're still that kid who wouldn't give up," she said, nudging him. "And you're still my home," he replied. They stood there, hands clasped, under a sky that felt infinite. The boy who'd been thrown out had found his place, and the woman who'd taken him in had found her legacy. Together, they'd built something unbreakable, a sanctuary for all who needed it.